and I've got kind of two. I know our time is weird, but I've got two things that maybe can get slotted in somewhere, and I wanted to bounce them both off you. Okay.
Okay, sure.
So first is Fat Princess. You got a take on Fat Princess?
Um, Let me think about that. Fat Princess was,
So it
gosh.
was a cat. It was largely a casual game. I think it was included with PS3 at launch, or PS. It was on like PS Live. It was kind of like a casual Team Fortress type thing where there were different categories, different classes of like villagers you could use, and you'd play as one of them. But there was an interesting mechanic where it was basically a capture the flag map, but instead of a
Oh
flag, you
yeah,
had a
but
princess, and you could.
wasn't she like the ball of the game or something like that?
Yeah, yeah. So each team had a princess in their castle, and the
Mm,
goal was to break. So again, very much a traditional gaming storyline so far.
yeah.
And the goal was to break into the castle and capture the other princess.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were playing out in the battlefield, out in the game's active area, kind of a big arena system, there would spawn cakes, and your character could grab a cake and then
Yeah.
run back and feed it to your princess. And
Mm-hmm.
if you did, the sprite of the princess would get visibly fatter.
Yeah.
And this wasn't just like a haha joke. It had a game mechanic in that if the opposing team tried to capture that princess and the cake was on a certain amount of time before she shrank down to her normal, easily capturable size. But the game
Yeah.
mechanic, as the princess fattened up, she'd be
Mm.
tougher and tougher to kidnap. And I mean, again, literal joke about fat people were tougher to kidnap.
Which is
But
exactly, yeah, yeah. Mm. So that's the same issue that I have with the fat characters who have this like incredibly offensive like fart mechanics as their game mechanics, where they just make it about their size instead of having the size be. I'm not saying the size should be irrelevant, but the character shouldn't be defined by the size. And if someone's literally the ball and like the size is the only thing that matters about them, it kind of like I, I don't know, it achieves the opposite
so
effect to me to some extent.
maybe you have to watch like a YouTube or two about it, or maybe this is another
No, no,
instance for me to
I do
disagree.
remember it now that you
Oh,
said it,
okay.
but
But
yeah,
having played it as a fat person,
yeah,
it didn't. I mean, so the whole tone of the game was very very light, and I noticed that and I kind of played it with the here we go again.
mm,
Um, but I noticed that some of the surrounding fluff pieces, talked about how much the servant, the not the peasants, I guess, loved the princess, and the princess, would. I mean, she'd say like, "Oh boy, cake," or stuff like
mm,
that. But it just was. I don't know. It just didn't come off as mean spirited. So
yeah,
I don't know. Maybe I'm giving him a pass just because it was a fun little game. Maybe I'm giving a pass because it was a representation of a fat woman.
mm,
And I'm missing something. But I don't know. I felt that it was an interesting thing
yeah,
where the fatness was not. It wasn't completely. It served a purpose in game. It was an interesting little game mechanic tweak.
mm,
Um, but yeah, no, I found it okay.
yeah.
And there was another thing I wanted to bounce off you as well. Uh, I think it's
There's
escaping me.
there's
Yeah, go
one
ahead.
thing I wanted to bounce off of you
Yeah, sure, sure,
because
sure.
I know this one's gonna be a little bit problematic with some other aspects, but
Uh-oh.
one thing that has like a really like makes my heart like all gushy and warm is the Pandarens in World of Warcraft. And I know them being those vaguely like pan Asian pandas has like their whole other
Yeah.
issues, and they're known to be like the beer brewers and the cooks and like the chefs and stuff like that. But I still adored that expansion, even though a lot of people hate it. I I loved all the other storylines they had as well. They had like storylines that were just as intense as everything else, just on top of the food thing. And the food was just this like sideline thing that you could do if you wanted to do like all the crafting achievements, and to some extent you had to do all the crafting achievements in that expansion, which is something that annoyed a lot of people. But I adore those pandas, and that's gonna be like it's maybe a little bit too personal. I might take it out of the podcast. I don't know, but
No,
I
no,
had this one.
yeah.
I had this
Go
experience.
ahead.
I was going through like really tough breakup when that expansion was being played and I was playing it. And like my favorite spot was you had on their continent, you had a very like hidden staircase that led up to like really the top of the mountain. It was like so far off the map, you didn't even see there was something off the map on unless you triggered the point of reaching the top of the stairs, and then suddenly when you clicked into your minimap you saw that there was like a tiny little like three huts and a little path, and there were like goats standing on the cliffs and everything. So it was so peaceful, and like the black market was hidden there that not everyone knew
Mm-hmm.
about. But there was also this little hut where you had to like you had to give some quests, um if you were doing that and if you wanted to do that. But when you took like the back entrance out of that hut, there was like a whirlpool, and depending on what time of day you went there, or what story progression you were in, there were like two big fat pandas just sitting there, and I just loved sitting next to them when I would go AFK. I would just sit into the whirlpool with them, and that was like one of the thing that relaxed me the most about this game at that time, just sitting there and like seeing them breathe all slowly, and then occasionally they would talk or say something and you see the speech bubbles, but most of the time they were just sitting there, and that was adorable. And I know the Pandaren have their whole other like ethnical issues, um but I loved having bigger people, and even like the female Pandarens, they were just a little bit chubbier, like cuter and fluffier, not just those like kind of like wave like elven creatures, or the
Sure.
like very like otherwise exaggerated like Draenei's or stuff like that. So it was really
Mm-hmm.
nice to have something more relatable.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the Mist of Pandaria expansion for Warcraft, had a it was, I mean, to me, my take on it is that's kind of like that's Blizzard's corrections period. That's them trying to figure out how do we how do we expand our market share. And a lot of it was obviously a grab for a younger gaming audience, an Asian gaming audience. I think that there were a ton of, and also kind of trading on some Orientalist tropes that are problematic in their own right.
Exactly.
um
Yeah.
and I think a lot of that was motivated by just crass capitalist. Now I'm raising the red banner, but no, I think some of that was that, and some of it was heavy handed. But
hmm
part of it too, one of the things that we have to remember is like we take what we can get a lot of the time. It's
Yeah.
just it's so, if the option is kind of problematic, fluffy pandas who are can they can you can run a Pandaren character up to the highest levels and compete just as it's a completely
hmm
cosmetic difference except for like one or two things with any other character in the game. But their general fluff is kind of a little bit goofier and slower, and some mix of like
What
drunken
they're
master meets home cooking. I don't know. Yeah. So
Well, the game mechanics aren't slower. They just like, you know
no,
what I
no,
mean?
just the fluff around it. The just the character feel
Mm,
is. But on some level, you could make the same argument for like the motivating things behind hobbits. Like it's just there. It's I don't know. I mean, I certainly wasn't bothered by it from a fat representation thing.
mm,
I'm willing to not essentialize people who fuck it up as the enemy, because you've got to remember, um fat phobia is so pervasive and so insidious that a lot of us do it nearly unconsciously. And so if Blizzard got a couple things wrong with the pandas, the fact that they were trying, I'll not necessarily a pass, keep working on it, make it
yeah,
all the way better. But
yeah,
I think a step in the right direction.
I agree. Yeah.